My name is Derek Lewis, and I'm the Executive Director of Greenville First Steps. And thank you for joining us for this community conversation about childcare workforce issues. Today, I am joined by three different community leaders. Dr. Amanda McDougald Scott conducted her PhD work on childcare workforce challenges in South Carolina. LaVonda Paul is a member of the Greenville First Steps Board of Directors and is also the owner-operator of Small Impressions, a child development center in Greenville County. And Leslie Latimer is the director and founder of the Palmetto Shared Services Alliance, which is an organization that helps provide support for childcare centers across the state. So we'll start our first question with Vonda. Vonda, as an owner and operator of a Greenville-based childcare center, just tell us a little bit about the workforce challenges that you're seeing in your center. Are you able to recruit staff and retain staff during this really difficult environment?
I'm not going to get up here and give you no long, drawn-out story. We all have the same issues. People coming to work. Then when you are able to get somebody hired, you got to wait for the paperwork. So then that's a deterrent sometime. Or you have to deal with, I'm late or I can't come. So I want to say thank you to my staff. I have a lot of older staff. Some of them have been with me 10 years or longer. So I have been fortunate enough to have staff that have stuck around. So what we're doing now, there are challenges. Are we stretched thin? Yeah, we are. But you know what? When you're good to people, people are good to you. Some of my old employees and some of the parents, hey, what y'all need? I can come in for an hour. I can come in and read to the kids. I can be your gopher. I can go to the kitchen, what you want. So we have been able to make it work since this whole pandemic has hit. So we hadn't skipped a beat. We only closed down once, 2 summers ago when COVID got rampant. But other than that, we've been able to stay open. Hadn't had to turn anybody away because we didn't have teachers. My teachers have been coming. So I thank my teachers for that. But is there a magic recipe? Find y'all some grandmas that sit at home, some retirees, some old veterans, some preachers, whoever has a desire to work with children. Some of them don't even want to get paid. They just want to come. If they like you, they'll help you.
Leslie, as the director of the Palmetto Shared Services Alliance, how does Vonda's experiences compare to those you may be hearing about from childcare providers across the state? You know, I hear Vonda talking about health insurance and retirement and starting pay, but, I also hear people talking about how do we just get childcare employees to keep their interview appointments and show up for a job interview?
So first of all, I want to say congratulations to you, Vonda, because that is clearly not a response that we're hearing from pretty much anybody. And I think most of the people in the room can probably relate that they are not like Vonda. So congratulations on that. So we are hearing statewide that it's a trend for not only recruiting staff, but retaining staff. And one thing that I did want to mention, and I was talking at my table and to several other people, 2 weeks ago, we went to the National Shared Services Conference in Austin, Texas. My staff did. And this is not a statewide trend in South Carolina. This is a nationwide trend. And so I don't know how, like Derek said, you're not going to get answers today, right? So that's not what this is about, but just talking through maybe ways that we can eliminate some of the barriers or figure out ways to recruit and retain staff. So one of the things that we're seeing as a major issue in South Carolina and again nationwide is the retention. So you might be able to get somebody in, but you're not keeping those people. And we're learning that a lot of times it's just a not for me. I didn't expect, my job description didn't say, your job description doesn't say that you have to change diapers in an infant classroom. It's just understood, right? And so we're dealing with that. We're also dealing with the fact, and I was talking to, I think it was you, Shannon, about people are leaving childcare or early care and education to go to Starbucks because they're starting you at $12 to $15 an hour when the bulk of childcare centers are paying $8 an hour, $8 to $10 an hour. So you're getting more, and you're not having to get on floors or play with children or change a poopy diaper. So that's what we're seeing most trouble with is the retaining of staff. The other thing that we're seeing as a trend is being ghosted. So kind of what Derek said. So you're having 6 people apply for a job, and maybe 6 of the candidates are great, and you have 5 positions to fill, but they're not actually showing up for an interview, or they show up for an interview and don't show up for their first day. And so that's not okay. So one of the ways that we've responded at Palmetto Shared Services Alliance is that we do have the job board. And I was going to touch on this a little bit later, but our jobs that are being posted, and so some of you who have used our job board may not see this, but they're getting 15 to 20,000 views. Okay, and so we are hearing really great things about our job board, not only from the views standpoint, but also from being able to hire these people. They're actually getting good candidates. We offer recruitment and retention training. So if you have not taken that, if you are a child care provider, please sign up to take that. We do offer it online, in person via webinar form. It's really great on tips and tricks on how to properly recruit and retain those staff. The other thing that I wanted to touch on here is one thing that we heard from a lot of child care providers across the state and across the nation is to start with some phone interviews, because you can weed people out. So don't bring them into your center, waste your time or their time, but do a phone interview. Maybe check their references and their backgrounds if you want to do that prior to even bringing them in for a second step.
Something that you might want to consider that has allowed my staff to stay, we do luncheons. We love to eat. So we're always doing different luncheons, impromptu things. If you go to my Facebook page, I gave them a card yesterday. Well, one of my staff fell out in the floor like he slayed in the spirit. But staff like stuff like that, the impromptu. Or I bust in their classroom, hey, you're the teacher. I'm like, me? I'm like, yeah. But stuff like that, that's what has kept my staff around. We talk, we act like a family. So if you come, you might get a joke or two, but we're like family there. So I think that's why a lot of them love to stay, because we're like a family away from home.
So, I know you did a lot of kind of statewide work on, and so, as they talk about these kind of workforce issues, I know we've talked about that pay and access to health insurance are really kind of some of the barriers that keep people out of this sector. What else are you finding? Because your work was actually pre-COVID, during COVID, and now post-COVID.
Right. So I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir with this group, but I just wanted to drop a couple of statistics related to this about turnover in the pandemic. So recently, just last month, the Center for the Study of Childcare Employment in Berkeley did an analysis of the Bureau of Labor statistics to show that since February 2020, we're still behind in early care and education jobs by 11%. So we're at 88.9% of child care jobs that are filled today compared to February 2020. So that's pretty stark. And I also just want to quickly, just to give a little bit more context, I know Leslie was talking about what a lot of child care workers are being offered when they start here, which is the top reason I found in my study and my research that I've been doing. The top reason people are leaving is the pay. So the median wage of a child care worker in South Carolina is $10.73 an hour. So that's also about $22,310 a year. Now, I broke some of this down, and I want to mention that MIT has stated that the living wage in South Carolina is actually about $67,327 before taxes. So, as we can see now, I looked up the newest federal poverty guidelines, and what I could find is that really one adult with no child working in childcare in South Carolina is making $5 a day too much to qualify for Medicaid if South Carolina were to expand Medicaid at 138% FPL. Now, another thing that we know, and I was just reviewing the DSS report last night as well, which backed up the things that I've already found again, which is that most centers not only are not offering a living wage, mostly because they can't, but unless you're married, you are also unlikely to have any sort of health insurance. So that is an area that I've really targeted as a priority in my work. And I've got another one too, but the top one is, first of all, I'm just going to be blunt. I really think that South Carolina should expand Medicaid. And if not, I think we could do it, we can do a Medicaid waiver 1115, which would give a special classification for child care workers to be covered by Medicaid. And now that's not going to work for a person who is just a single childless childcare teacher, because they make too much for the 138%, but we also know, right, that that's not a living wage. And that is why it needs to be 200% FPL. The 200% FPL for a family of two is $36,620.
So maybe just to kind of, for people maybe who may be listening who haven't heard this conversation before, so the median salary for childcare workers in South Carolina is
$20,000. This is the newest number.
And so
last night, $22,310 a year.
And that's about $10 an hour.
Yep.
And so we know that we can either inflate wages to attract people, or we can offer them benefits.
Right.
And so I think what you're saying is you could remove the need to offer benefits if we change the Medicaid eligibility, so those families could qualify for Medicaid, but then they could also then focus their salaries on increasing wages instead of adding benefits.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So Vonda, I mean, can you just talk a little bit about? I mean, I don't know what the starting pay is where you guys are, but 10 seems low. Chick-fil-A is, I think, at 15. I mean, how do you address kind of pay issues and build those into maybe a employee benefit package that you offer your staff?
Well, unfortunately, I do have a staff person that makes 10. My older staff do make a lot more, but it's not like the Chick-fil-A, so I am competing with that. But to offset that a little bit, a lot of my staff are married too. So therefore, they're on their husband's insurance, or their husband make a lot more. But it is difficult because when you do have talented people and they're looking for the 15, 16, 17, I'm not going to get in over my head trying to do that when I know financially I cannot. So I try to offset that by, hey, doing bonuses so many times out the year, doing the lunches, doing the impromptu gift cards, doing the impromptu, hey, y'all, what y'all doing for the weekend? Let's do the movies. Let's do something to try to offset, because I don't want to get in over my head with something I know as a business owner I cannot afford to keep up. So it's one thing to get them through the door, but can I keep up paying you $20 an hour? And the answer is no.
First of all, on behalf of Leslie, I'd encourage everybody to check out the Jobs Center that's posted on the Shared Services website. And that's at www.palmettoservices.org. It's a great site, and a lot of providers are posting jobs, but also a lot of employees are finding potential new jobs there. Leslie, as you look across the state, what are some of the success stories that you're seeing in other communities, maybe where centers are recruiting and retaining high-quality staff, even in this difficult working environment?
So one of the things that we're seeing is people thinking outside the box on benefits. So not just healthcare or medical benefits, but benefits like giving your hire date or your birthday off. Like that is, and paying for that, right? And so that is a way that you're attracting people. So what we're learning, and no offense to anyone in the room if you fit in this category, but your millennials and your Gen Xers are wanting a whole lot more than your baby boomers and people after, in between the baby boomers and the millennials. And so they're really interested in the benefits like hire date, birth date, things like that. So Palmetto Shared Services offers benefits to our members that they can then extend to their staff. But one of the things that we offer is like telemedicine, for example. So even if you're not giving them health insurance, we have the telemedicine. We have prescription cards, so ways that they can save money. We also have options for things like life insurance. So I think Latimer did this in the past. Like if you work for me for 90 days, right, I'm going to give you a $10,000 life insurance policy, because that ends up costing a center $5-ish a month for a $10,000 life insurance policy, which is a heck of a lot cheaper than even 25 or 50 cents extra per hour. So thinking outside of the box when you're thinking about benefits. Other things is obviously if you can figure out how to give more money, because like Amanda said, you can offset that. I mean, there is the healthcare marketplace. That's a good option. There is Medicare, Medicare and Medicaid if you qualify for those things that are really good. But one thing that I want to make sure that I put a plug in about is the stabilization of the building block grants. Those dollars, if you have not applied for those grants, you're crazy. because those dollars can be used for salary. And centers are getting upwards of $100,000 in these grants, y'all. So if you're not applying for them, apply for them and use them for salaries. Use them for improvements at your center that make your staff want to come to work every day, right? And so thinking outside of the box when it comes to benefits and figuring out how you can use these federal and state dollars to kind of offset your deficit for salaries.
And that's so funny she said that. When I told you I don't do an increase in salary, but we do allow paid time off for various holidays, and we shut down a whole week during the summer, and I pay them for that whole week that we're closed. So that's been a plus and a drawing and selling point for my business.
So, I know you've been looking at policy on this national level, and I think there are some states that have more childcare friendly policies that may be implemented at the state level that could help a child care center maybe with its operations or offsetting wages. I know in North Carolina they have the wages program where they just actually add on to an employee's salary. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the states that you've noticed that have maybe some policy implementations that we might benefit from here?
Yes, I'm actually glad you asked me this question because I was very excited to see the other day that New Mexico actually just passed legislation that they were going to subsidize childcare up to 375% and eventually up to 400% income. So they're using those tax dollars and not waiting for Build Back Better to pass, which it should, because it's got a lot of good money in there that would actually benefit the child care sector enormously. And then, therefore, also the rest of our United States population. But they went ahead and just said, you know what, we're going to do that here in New Mexico. And we're going to, we're not going to be paying checks back to people for $60. We're going to be, investing that tax money directly where we know that it's going to keep our economy afloat. And I think that's what we need to be doing here in South Carolina. There's no reason that we shouldn't do that here, And I've even stated before that, if we can't do it at the state level, then we need to look at what our county can do, and we need to look at what our city can do, because Albuquerque did it before. They were first. Albuquerque, the city itself, showed that they could do this kind of work with their tax dollars in their city, and they could make a difference. And so the state followed suit. So we have just one example there. I like wages and some of the other programs that are out there to help supplement, but I think that those are kind of Band-Aids. I think the long-term solution is applying those tax dollars and the subsidies and making sure that everyone has a sustainable access.
I think it was it Louisiana that actually offers tax breaks not only to the business owner, but it offers tax breaks to the employee's income tax if they work in a center that's a highly rated center. Yeah. And so it's incentivizing not only the business owner to participate in their version of ABC, but that business owner can then tell their employees, because we're in ABC, you will pay less income taxes, which I thought was a really great way to incentivize the employees who are choosing to work in high quality centers. And then Martha is going to talk a little bit about 4K, which I actually think is another example of where policy work really came into play in South Carolina, because one of the things that it did was it recognized that expanding public 4K was going to put a huge burden on the child care sector, because it's where most child care providers tend to break even, if not kind of finally make a profit. And the idea was, rather than having it be entirely publicly funded and run through school districts, how does it run through private child care centers and faith-based child care centers? And that was an innovation, I think, that happened here that allowed child care centers to participate in the idea of universal 4K without losing out necessarily to school districts. And then we're going to talk some more about that later. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so I think the question was, what role can we have to have this change? So really, that was what we hoped this would be the first step in, and that we hoped that as providers and owners and operators and community members, if there are policy issues that we can help drive forward, this would be the right place to do it. Shared Services Alliance has a statewide partnership. State Office of First Steps is constantly asking us, what policy changes would make it easier for providers to continue to operate. And so I think this was, we hoped, kind of a first step towards some of that. Leslie, one concern we frequently hear is that no matter how quickly a center can recruit, screen, and hire staff, the fingerprinting process takes an incredibly long time. And that leaves a classroom without a worker for weeks while we're waiting on those fingerprint results to come back.
And we're working on it. And again, it goes back to that conference that we just came from. We're hearing it that it's a nationwide shortage, right? So they don't have enough people to do the fingerprints and get them processed and get the information out or whatever. So I wish I had an answer for you, Vonda, Amanda, Derek. You guys may, but I don't. I wish we could speed it up, but we're kind of stuck.
Leslie, tell us a little bit about some of the changes that Palmetto Shared Services Alliance is proposing within DSS to make it easier to hire staff and to find adequate subs.
So before I touch on that, I do want to say, to kind of go to Amanda's point with some of the policies. So one of the things that we're hearing statewide that is a policy that we can change on the state level is the 6-month experience, that it's really, really, really killing centers. So even if we change that to 3 months. So what we're experiencing is that a new employee comes in, for those of you that don't know about the 6-month experience, that a new employee comes in and if they have never worked in childcare before, they cannot be unsupervised in a classroom, right? And so you're technically having to pay 3 people for 2 people's job. So in order for these people to get their 6-month experience, they have to be with someone else. And in some cases, you need 2 individuals to do a job, and so you're having to have that third person in the classroom. So it's literally killing centers' payroll. So even changing that to 3 months or 2 months or heck, 6 weeks. I mean, like, give them, some kind of experience in the classroom or allowing other field experiences to offset some of that 6 month, I think would be really helpful. So that is a huge thing that we're hearing across the state. But to Derek's point, so we are working with DSS on the possibility and all the logistics behind a substitute pool. So this is something that Shared Services has wanted since we were at First Steps. And really before that. And so when we started Palmetto Shared Services, we started talking to Lee Bullock, who was the DSS director at the time, and she was really kind of behind all things that Shared Services did, including the possibility of the substitute pool. And then she retired abruptly, and we had to start all over. So we are really kind of just now in a place where we can explore this as an option. So Michelle Bowers, who is the state administrator, is really kind of behind this happening, and they've come to us for a proposal and all of that kind of stuff. So we are really close to kind of hopefully finalizing some of this stuff. The questions that we have at this point is who's going to pay for it and how is it going to look and who's going to employ these subs, that kind of thing. So we are close. So y'all just keep your fingers crossed and pray for me often because I'm a little bit stressed over the whole thing. We will probably triple our staff and make really big things happen for South Carolina. So let's go for it.
I want to say a special thanks to Leslie and Amanda and Vonda for joining us today. Greenville First Steps is really interested in childcare workforce issues and what we can do to support childcare providers across the state. But there's another group that's really involved in helping support access to childcare, and that's the State Office of First Steps and the free SC 4K program. Martha Strickland is the director of that program, and we're going to have her come and just talk a little bit about the program and what opportunities it might provide for a child care provider in the state and what opportunities it might provide for a family to receive free 4K throughout South Carolina.
So I want to tell you that there is power in your voice. Every one of you, there is power in your voice, and legislators do listen. I've got a prime example that I'll tell you in a minute about, but what First Steps 4K does, we fund the Child Early Reading Development Education Program in private child care centers, whether they're nonprofit, for-profit, faith-based, and this current year now also nonprofit independent schools that are not child care licensed, but they have their own governing board. And we also do fund charter schools, like Legacy Early College is one of our sites. They have their own child care license and their own 501c3. So we fund that 501c3. So back in 2006, this is when the law first began. Do you remember, how many of you South Carolinians have been here since 2006? And you remember Abbeville versus the state of South Carolina. That was very shamefully dubbed the Carter of Shame lawsuit. Do you remember that? So that is where the Child Early Reading Development Education Program came from. Judge Thomas Cooper ruled on that suit and said the suit was about school districts not being funded equitably across the state. If you've got a low millage rate, low tax base, there's not much money for schools, and, vice versa. So the 36 districts got together and said, this is not fair. We don't have money to begin with, and we're being doubly penalized. The sad part about that is that funding formula still is the same today. But the good thing that came out of it, Judge Thomas Cooper said, children are starting school in South Carolina in completely different places. We've got to fix early childhood. So that was 2006. He charged the General Assembly to do something about it. And they created, now it's called the Child Early Reading Development Education Program. CERDEP is the acronym, which we call it 4K. So anytime you see First Steps 4K, we really do mean CERDEP, that legislated full-day 4-year-old kindergarten program for children from homes of poverty. And that's defined in law as 185% of the Medicaid level, which I think this year it's like a little bit over $50,000 for a family of 4, which surprises a lot of people. Like, whoa, that is a home of poverty, making $50,000 if you've got a family of 4. So they would qualify. And what Derek was referring to, so when it first began in 2006, there were 36 of the 79 school districts that were qualified, and now the numbers even changed. I think there are 72 districts in the state. They've incorporated, some of the smaller districts together. But now the great news is this current school year is the very first year that every single district in South Carolina qualifies for CERDEP funding. Now the school districts, it's up to them. So the CERDEP money comes in two streams. One stream goes to the public schools to fund and support their full-day 4-year-old kindergarten for children from homes of poverty. There was another funding stream, EIA, that Education Improvement Act, that provided half-day, and that's what Greenville County had, half-day 4-year-old funding. Districts could choose which one they want. They couldn't do both. They could elect half-day EIA or full-day 4K funding for children from homes of poverty. And I'm not exactly sure what Greenville landed upon. Okay, so we won't figure that out right now. But what I can tell you, it does not matter what a school district, what the superintendent decides for their district. First Steps 4K will fund any child across South Carolina that qualifies for that. So we don't have to stick to districts or elementary school zones, which is another benefit. Our lawmakers, they really do listen about childcare. When this first began in 2006, there was conversation about only putting it in the public schools. Now, can you imagine? It would have gutted childcare in South Carolina. Like Derek said, it is the gravy, the 4-year-olds are the gravy that support the infants and toddlers in a program in private childcare. So we were very fortunate. You really do have lawmakers that listen and understand, and there are some. I'll give you an example. Last year this time, one lawmaker during the rounds of a proviso, which like right now they're finalizing all this, one lawmaker stood up in a meeting and said, I had a parent call me and tell me that they were scared for their child to go to kindergarten. They weren't ready because they hadn't been anywhere for 2 years. And he wants the child to go to 4K. Can we put that in the law? Well, yeah, let's just do that. So one parent told one legislator, and they wrote it in the law, the CERDEP law, that if a parent chooses not to send their child to 5K and the child income qualifies, they can go to 4K, although they're 5K aged. But the thing about it, now we don't really publicize this because to me, I was like, what in the world are they thinking? Because it's red shirt. That does not give the child permission to stay forever one grade behind. It allows them to go to 4K in their 5K year, and then when they enter public school, guess where they go? Yes. So that's why we don't really get out there and tell. LaVonda, did you know that was part of our law? Well, I would really be interested to know if that parent that suggested it to the one lawmaker, if they actually chose that for their child, and then what's happened this year. You know, those stats are interesting to me, like what did come about. I can tell you we didn't have anybody. We have over 3,000 4-year-olds right now being served across the state, and we didn't have a one out of age to ask, right, Sam? So they're ready, and they're coming. Next year's 4-year-olds, they were 1 when the pandemic hit. So you think about what they've lost during that time period. We're hearing all over the state, and I bet I'm preaching to the choir right now about the social, emotional issues that are going on with children, like this. We had a speaker the other day talk about the difference between rage and anger. Our little ones are just filled with this. I don't know what to even call it. You know, some people are calling it rage, some are calling it anger. And they couldn't tell you what they're feeling because that's not something they can verbalize. So we know it's a call to action to make sure that our programs are providing that strong social emotional support to make certain. And we use conscious discipline in our classrooms. I hope you've heard of that program. It is on the premise, it's about self-regulation skills, but it is also an adult-first model because you can't pass on to children what you don't possess yourself. Right? If I'm an out-of-control, loud teacher, what are those kids doing? Woo! Loud and out of control. Yes. So we all need to be able to breathe and step back. Cross your hands like that for me, please. And pretzel up. And let's take 3 deep breaths. You ready? Belly breathing. In, out. In, out. In, out. And stretch back out. You've just re-engaged both sides of your brain, even though you were sitting. So I hope you feel a little bit more alert. Simple techniques to help children. And I know like mindfulness, we were talking about that earlier. There's a lot of that phrase going around, mindfulness and helping children. So let me get back to what actually Startup is and what we provide. So we have a website, free4ksc.org. That's our URL. Easy to remember, and that's what we provide, free4ksc.org. That is a parent portal that parents go on. They select, and we have providers here. Raise your hand if you're a First Steps 4K provider. Yay, we have 3 of them here this year. This was the first year for Greenville County, so they were pretty much like a pig in a poke. Is that the old saying? Our guinea pigs. But I hope that they've had a fantastic year, and it's so great. So this is the first time we've gotten to see them in person. Everything has been virtual and virtual visits, and we've been able to accomplish that. But I want to tell you just a little bit about what we provide to you. So we do provide the tuition. And in your packet, so I think my gang, Joy Mazer and Shayla Pettigrew are 4K regional managers who both have coaches that serve. Stacy Greenwald is a coach here in Greenville County, and Dora Young is another one, but she's on vacation. If y'all want to pass out those packets, that would be great, so we can kind of look at some of this stuff. And you can see our First Steps 4K Fox. You'll see our little fox ready to go to school on everything that you see. We provide not only the tuition for the child to attend, but we provide all the curriculum materials and all the training and coaching. You'll have a coach that comes at least every other week into the center, and we provide a classroom materials grant as well to begin with, based on the curriculum that you choose. We definitely have set curriculum models. Creative curriculum, high scope, and Montessori are the 3. Those are the biggies in our child development world. So we provide coaching on that. So we've got a goodie bag for everybody. And inside there's one of these packets. So lots of information. A couple of the things that I want to make sure that you understand. Being a faith-based center does not mean that you cannot participate in CERDEP. One of the very first things when we were First Steps was given the authority to fund and become the 4K provider for the state, we went to the Attorney General and asked, and he said, absolutely in no way. We got a letter that it does not matter if you teach Bible verses, if you whatever. We actually have a Hasidic Jewish center in Horry County, and they teach Hebrew during the day. We've got several that have chapel during the day at other times. Not a problem. So that's one of the big fallacies that people need to understand off the bat. Sometimes when they hear state funded, they think, oh, we can't participate. But there's no such. Faith-based centers can participate. Also, we don't have to have the entire class funded by First Steps 4K. We will provide the curriculum, the materials, the training, support. But if you only had a couple of slots that you're like, well, maybe I want to test this out, you can have full-paying students, you can have private other voucher students, and First Steps 4K mixed in the class. As educators, we all know that heterogeneous mixes of children are best for children. So that is another model that we really do like to see happen in centers. We've had some centers that might have a very high-paying tuition rate with families, higher income families, and they say, we want our children to have a more diverse population. And so they will come to us and say that. We would like to have First Steps 4K in our center so that we can provide a more diverse population, not only to the children and the families, those community-based events that they are able to hold. So I just want to briefly let you look through this little portfolio. There's all the details, how to get in touch with us. There's our guidelines. And yes, we do face those same employment problems. The teachers and the assistants are not employees of First Steps 4K. They are employees of the center where they work. So we pay you the tuition, but let me tell you, this is probably one of the best things you're going to want to hear. We have figured out how to pay you 1 month in advance. See these heads shaking? When I heard that about not paying, I was like, whoop, we check that box. So we know that, generally, like in August when school starts, we know how many children should be attending, but then it depends on who shows up and sits in the seat that are actually enrolled. But by the time we get to about mid-September, we're good to go. We know how many kids you've got in that classroom that we're funding. We know the tuition rate, the option that you chose. And so we're able our Angelica Coppin is our finance manager for 4K. She just does the math, and you get a direct deposit a month before, like the end of October for November. So that's really a nice carrot that people like to hear about. What are some other questions that might pop up in your head as you think about, would I be qualified or think about being a provider? Oh, one thing I want to tell you, we do know in Greenville County alone, there are 1,500, data tell us there are 1,500 to 2,000 unserved eligible 4-year-olds in Greenville County. We need providers desperately because these children need these services before they show up in public schools and kindergarten, having been nowhere. Please. So in the law, I'm the only person that can disenroll a state-funded 4-year-old child. So what we do in that instance, we want to make sure we really work with you. We work with the family. SCEMA, which y'all might be familiar with SCEMA, South Carolina Infant Mental Health Association, we, in partnership with them through some PDG funding, they've established, we're just kind of helping them, the PAIR Network, have you heard of that? Program for Early Attuned Partnership for Early Attuned Relationships. And it's So we refer to PAIR. That's where this all came about, because we're seeing these social emotional issues all over the place. So we refer to PAIR, and PAIR then works with the parent, the center, us, and the child. Not so much the child, it's more the adults that they work with to talk about, how we're going to get there. And of course, we do work closely with school districts for Child Find to see if there's something bigger there. But, there's a humongous amount of research about the preschool to prison pipeline. We do not want to contribute to that, and it's called soft expulsion when a director tells a parent, your child's just not fitting in here very well. I think there's another center down the road that might be a better fit for your child. That's still expulsion, whether we want to think about it or not. It is expulsion. So it is our goal to try to make sure that we can find the solution and not have a child leave. But, I'm going to tell you that in legislation, it does give me the authority if there's, sometimes you're going to find parents that just won't work with you. Like, I see these heads shaking. Y'all been there, done that, right? It's the school's problem and not the parents' problem, but that's an area where we really try to get very involved. Sam does a great deal of outreach and individual talking with parents. She probably talks with the most parent of anybody in our program to really help the parent understand and what is the root of the problem, why. I hate to blame everything on the pandemic, because we know problems were there before the pandemic started, but we've certainly seen them escalate through that. But we want to be as helpful as we can. And we've seen a great growth in conscious discipline in the classrooms that effectively use conscious discipline. But now, they've even started a new thing that we're going to do training in our academy in August and provide materials for classrooms. It's called the Active Calming Center. So there are strategies that the teacher, if a child is really out of control. We've always had a safe place, which is not time out. It's where a child can go when they feel that hotness, that red hot burning inside them, where they can go and they can have some time to calm down and have books and pillows and breathing techniques and things. But this is more strategized, this Active Calming Center, where the teacher leads them through pressing on the wall, their hands on the wall, and they press on the wall and their footprints where they can stomp, to try to get some of that stuff out. So it's a one-on-one with the teacher and a child. Active Calming Center, that's something that we're planning on implementing for next year because we've heard this so frequently. I think you have lots of parents that would qualify. If you are a CFP provider, you know who's on Medicaid, you know who qualifies. But that $50,000 threshold for a family of 4, we also are able to offer, thanks to our governor and our legislature, we're able to offer a 220-day option. So we really have 4 options, but we pay on 2 scales. If you're an ABC provider, B or above, you automatically get a 10% higher tuition rate. We have 4 options. We do the traditional school year, and that's what all districts are funded for. Some of them are going to that extended calendar, but it's still 180 days. But we're able to do a 220-day calendar, and we can do a 6.5-hour day or an 8-hour day. The other biggie that we were able to accomplish through DSS and SC Vouchers help, last year they came to us, it's probably about this time last year, and they have got a lot of federal money. This is not COVID money. This is their regular block grant money for vouchers, and it wasn't being used. We just heard about parents not going to work, not going to school. So we were able, and they needed to help families. So in concert with the governor's GEAR funding too, we have a program called First Steps 4K plus siblings. So if you have an enrolled First Steps 4K student, they can bring along all their siblings for free. There's no other. I know. It can be a game changer for a family. So for 52 weeks, that family automatically gets 0 to 3 full-time care voucher. We call it a scholarship because we just wanted to use a different word. And the 4-year-old can get wraparound care. Through 12-year-olds can get aftercare, just because the First Steps 4K student is enrolled. So it is a whole family package. That was in concert with the governor. You know, he funded that lots of tech schools for year programs, 52-week programs. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Think what a game changer. 4-year-old enrolls in First Steps 4K. They bring along little brother, little sister, big brother, big sister after school. Mom or dad enrolls in a 52-week welding certificate program. And for 52 weeks, that family pays no child care, none. And the parents in school to get a welding certificate. They graduate. Now they're able to support their family, and they can pay you for child care after that 52 weeks. And there are a lot of other programs that qualify for that. So our state has really invested heavily in trying to think about families. This is not just about one child, a 4-year-old, but it is about the entire family, the little ones, the big ones, and the grown-ups. Workforce equity, which is what you were talking about, that connection between the workforce development and child care, I don't think our state's ever realized it more than now. I was asked to speak, this was about 2 months ago, at the Department of Commerce's Rural Development Summit, and I think I was the first person ever from child care, because they were looking at me, they didn't even hardly know what I was talking about. They really didn't understand about DSS licensing. You know, Michelle Bowers definitely needs to come talk to them about licensing, but to make sure that workforce development, if you don't have child care, you don't have workforce. It's just a fact. So that was very interesting that our state now is even understanding, the Commerce Department is understanding, whoa, we got a problem. Like Derek, you were saying about BMW. If you don't have child care, you don't have workers. So a lot of this, as you see, really is in concert together, that 4K plus siblings, to help that family get on their feet and not be able to have to pay child care. Sam's got some awesome stories. She's interviewed some families that we had a beautiful family that had 2 younger ones in child care in Gilbert, South Carolina. And dad was working, but mom wanted to go back to work, open her own business up. And with the help of First Steps 4K, she was able to do that. And so their future's a whole lot brighter for their 3 children and their whole family as they move forward. But we'd love to help you make that difference too, for all your families and all your children. Any other questions? So our tuition rate is in here too, that I want you to look over for those different options. But this is what is suggested. But we had a little change in legislation. We thought the base rate was going to be $5,100 per child, and that's 180 days, 6.5 hours, that minimum traditional year. And then Angelica figures all the rest of it based on that. But we got some good news. The legislature has given us the ability to use that as a minimum. So we haven't exactly come upon the figure that it's going to be, but I can tell you it's going to be more than this. We want to be highly competitive, not only with centers that that charge a pretty decent tuition, because I know it's still scraping the barrel. I don't think any of you went into child care so that you could retire to the Bahamas in a year, right? Not happening. And people, I know it's just crazy to me that people look at child care, they multiply the number of children that you're licensed for, look at your tuition rate, and they think, oh, they are making a killing over there. No, it's a bare bones, scrape by. Whether you're a profit or a nonprofit, you are scraping by every day, and we recognize that. So we certainly we fight for you every chance we get about these people need more. These people need more.
Greenville First Steps does plan to have future community conversations about child care workforce issues, and potential policy positions and ways that centers can get involved. And we encourage anyone who's interested in any of that work to contact me, Derek Lewis, at the Greenville First Steps website or at derek@greenvillefirststeps.org. Thanks for joining us today.